Atomic Energy Lab. It's the 1950s, and the US wants to produce future nuclear scientists in the middle of the Cold War. After all, the more nuclear scientists there are, the better the chances of winning the nuke arms race, unless the kids don't off themselves in a small nuclear experiment. That's where the Gilbert U-328 Atomic Energy Lab comes in. It was supposed to teach you about nuclear energy, but it also gave you a small taste of radiation exposure. Fun and education mixed together to form a deadly chemical reaction. The kit came with 4 pieces of uranium ore, not fake or pretend, but real radioactive rocks. It also included a Geiger counter to measure just how much danger you were in. There was a cloud chamber to watch radiation in action and an electroscope to detect radiation levels. In short, it lets you play scientist while possibly increasing your future doctor visits. The instruction manual was all full of wild ideas. It encouraged experiments where you handled the uranium like a bag of marbles. And even if you used up the radioactive fund, there was no problem because you could order more uranium. After all, every responsible household needed a fresh supply of glowing rocks. This wasn't even a cheap toy. It cost around $50 in the 1950s, about $600 today. That's a lot to pay for something that might turn your fingers into science experiments. While the kit wasn't exactly banned, it just didn't sell well because parents realized glowing children weren't the future they wanted. By 1952, the Atomic Energy Lab disappeared from shelves, effectively becoming one of the most dangerous toys in history. Bindi's beads. At first glance, Bindi's beads seemed like the perfect harmless toy. These tiny, colorful beads were arranged into fun shapes, sprayed with water, and, like magic, they stuck together. But the dark truth was that the real magic trick was making kids disappear straight to the emergency room. The manufacturer used a cheap chemical that, inside your body, turned into GHB. That's a drug that knocks people out and has a reputation for being a sexual offender's go-to weapon. That's not exactly the kind of surprise parents were hoping for. Instead of a cute craft project, kids ended up dizzy, throwing up, or completely unconscious. Instead of artistic children, parents got sick ones. But the bigger problem was that these beads were small, bright, and looked way too much like candy. Kids love putting things in their mouths, especially things they shouldn't. If they ate a few beads, they didn't just get a bad taste, but also got a one-way ticket to Toxic Town, where the attractions include seizures and comas. By 2007, enough kids had landed in the hospital that people finally realized something was very wrong. Scientists took one look at the chemical inside and thought these toys were potential rape drugs in disguise. The company tried to wash its hands clean by saying it was the factory's fault for using a cheaper chemical. Whatever the case, stores quickly yanked the toy off the shelves. Governments banned it, and parents probably wondered if they needed to start running lab tests on every toy their kids touched. Clackers. Imagine having a toy with 2 plastic balls on a string. Your job is to swing them so they smack together. The louder the clack, the better. That's basically what clackers were about. At first, that doesn't sound too harmful. The problem was that if you messed up, the balls would swing wildly and hit you right in the face. Now you have to explain how a toy punched and gave you a black eye. The real danger wasn't just the occasional broken teeth or even a bruised ego. These things were made of a type of plastic that had the durability of a potato chip. If you clacked them too hard, they didn't just break. Instead, they shattered into flying shards of doom. Kids thought they were playing a game, but they were actually testing whether plastic could turn into tiny daggers. Hospitals started seeing more and more kids show up with cuts, bruises, and missing teeth. At some point, someone realized that maybe a toy that could explode in a child's hands wasn't the best idea. Governments stepped in and banned the dangerous versions. It turns out that selling a toy that could turn into a grenade when it smashes your face isn't a good idea. Toy companies tried making a safer version, but the magic was gone. Safer versions of the Clackers just weren't the same. Eventually, they faded away, leaving behind a legacy of broken glasses and chipped teeth. We'd like you to join our legacy, though, by subscribing. Thanks. Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kid. The Cabbage Patch Snack Time Kid was supposed to be a fun doll. You put plastic snacks near its mouth, and it chewed them with tiny motorized rollers. It's like you're feeding your little brother, minus the picky appetite. But the problem was that its appetite was a bit too big. It didn't care if it was chewing food, hair, or fingers. If it could fit in the toy's mouth, it was snack time. What made things worse was that the doll had no off switch. Once it started chewing, it was like a tiny battery-powered vacuum that would eat the world if it could. Kids got their hair stuck, and some had to cut off chunks to escape. Imagine sitting there while a smiling doll slowly devours your ponytail. Instead of a fun time, you're on your way to a free haircut you didn't ask for. Parents tried pulling the doll away, but it had a death grip. The rollers locked on like a machine built for destruction. The only way to stop it was to yank out the batteries. But that's easier said than done while a child is screaming and a doll is chewing like it just found the best meal of its life. Mattel finally pulled the toy from stores in 1997. They offered refunds, hoping parents would forget the horror of a doll that acted like a tiny, unstoppable wood chipper. But by then, history realized that anything could go wrong when you have a doll with an insatiable appetite for everything. CSI Fingerprint Kit. Kids dreaming of solving crimes had to start somewhere safe. Instead of moonlighting actual detectives on the job, the CSI Fingerprint Kit tried to give kids the option of playing detective without actually going to the crime scene. But maybe crime scenes were safer than this toy. The kit came with white powder, so kids could lift fingerprints like real investigators. That sounds like a good idea for wannabe detectives, but it's more of a long-term death spell because that powder contained tiny asbestos fibers just waiting to hitch a ride into your lungs. Breathing them in could lead to mesothelioma, a deadly disease that takes its time before causing damage. By that time, asbestos was already banned in many products because it's extremely dangerous when inhaled, yet somehow this toy slipped through the cracks. It sat on store shelves, waiting for unsuspecting kids to dust for prints while unknowingly inhaling trouble. Once people realized that fingerprinting shouldn't come with a side of toxic dust, the kit was pulled from stores. Parents were told to throw it out immediately, which turned garbage bins into toxic cancer dumps. But by then, plenty of kids had already played with it. The damage was already done, turning the asbestos in the kids' system into ticking bombs waiting to explode and cause damage. Kinder Surprise Eggs. Kinder Surprise Eggs look fun because you get a 2-in-1 tandem of a chocolate treat and a toy. But they are little chocolate troublemakers because they also come with a third surprise, a possible trip to the hospital. These toys seemed like a genius idea. Chocolate on the outside, a plastic capsule inside, and a tiny toy waiting like a prize in a candy-coated treasure chest. A kid gets a sweet treat and a bonus toy, like a snack with built-in entertainment. But many kids found out the hard way that swallowing surprises isn't always fun. Too many chocolate-fueled accidents later, many countries, including the US, decided these little danger eggs weren't worth the risk. The problem is simple. The toy is not stuck to the chocolate, but is actually inside the shell. A kid takes a bite, swallows too soon, and suddenly, a choking hazard is wrapped in a snack. The plastic capsule is just the right size to block an airway. It is like the worst kind of prize that could potentially send a kid to heaven. Europe still allows Kinder Surprise Eggs, but they slap warning labels on them. The company even made a safer version called Kinder Joy, where the toy and chocolate do not mix. But the classic Kinder Surprise is still banned in the US because the government does not like playing the odds. If a candy needs safety instructions, maybe it is trying too hard to be both a snack and a puzzle. Magnetics. Playing with magnetics is usually fun, especially for kids who think it's magical when two things stick together, like clingy lovers. Magnetics pounced on this curiosity by letting kids play with magnets that you can snap together to make cool shapes. Normally, these toys are safe, but not when kids aren't smart enough to know they're not supposed to swallow them. Magnetics are essentially small plastic pieces with strong magnets inside. But if you accidentally swallow 2 or more of these toys, they don't sit in your insides like regular lost objects waiting to get pooped out. Instead, they traveled through your intestines and stuck together through soft tissue. This isn't a cute game of connect the dots, it was more like connect the holes in your gut. The magnets can squeeze and tear tissue, leading to infections, blockages, and surgery. Doctors have to step in and remove them before things get worse. Toddlers were most at risk because they thought everything was a snack, but older kids weren't spared as well because they used the magnetics as fake piercings, thinking they would look cool. Once inside the body, though, these little troublemakers ignored fashion trends and started causing damage. By 2006, magnetics was linked to one child's death and many serious injuries. This led to a massive recall. The toy later got safety upgrades, like bigger pieces and better casing, but parents were already too scared of toys that could potentially turn your insides into a battlefield. Yo-yo water balls. You already know how fun yo-yos and water balls are, but combine them, you get double the fun. The problem is you also get double the chaos and danger. That's the case of yo-yo water balls, which aren't banned in the US, but in many countries. At first, these toys look innocent enough for parents to give them a chance. You swing them, and they bounce back. They even look safer than regular yo-yos, hard enough to cause black eyes. On the other hand, yo-yo water balls are made of rubber with a jelly-like fluid. The problem is that the safest looking toys can also have a dark side. First, the cord is a choking hazard. It stretches like a rubber band and can wrap around your neck like it hates seeing people breathing. Kids have nearly strangled themselves because the cord tightens when pulled. The worst part is that the material is sticky, so it grips like it's holding a grudge. A toy that won't let go is not a good toy. Meanwhile, the jelly-like fluid can have some chemicals that can catch fire. One moment you're bouncing this toy around, the next moment it turns into a bouncing fireball of destruction, especially if it bursts near an open flame or even a tiny spark. No kid should play with a toy that could double as a mini fireworks show. The cord can also be so stretchy that it could stretch really far and return with the energy of a Mike Tyson punch. Kids have ended up in the hospital because of this. Getting slapped by your own toy is embarrassing enough, but getting sent to the hospital because of it is even worse. Lawn darts. Darts are already dangerous enough as they are, but when you triple their size and market them as outdoor toys for kids, you just ask for trouble. That's why lawn darts were basically weapons disguised as toys. You took a giant metal spike, threw it in the air, and hoped it didn't find a skull before it found the ground. Nothing says fun like dodging impalement in your own backyard. Each dart had a sharp metal tip heavy enough to make sure it stuck into the ground. The goal was to land it inside a plastic ring, but reality had other plans. Kids had terrible aim. Instead of hitting the ring, they hit feet, cars, trees, and occasionally someone's head. That turned family game night into a first aid lesson or even a possible homicide scene. The darts were about a foot long with fins to help them fly straight. This meant they didn't just drop, but soared like tiny javelins of doom. A direct hit sent people straight to the hospital with deep wounds, broken bones, or worse. In the US, at least 3 kids died from lawn dart injuries. Thousands of others learned that nature's helmet, also known as the skull, was no match for a falling spear. By 1988, the US decided enough was enough and banned lawn darts completely. Some companies tried to bring them back with safer designs, but the ban stuck. Today, the only way to get the original deadly version is as a collector's item that is shady enough to land you in a prison cell if anyone caught you playing with them. Rollerblade Barbie. Every girl, or girl at heart, loves playing with Barbie dolls, normally one of the most harmless toys in the world. But they're not always harmless when some dolls are essentially tiny flamethrowers on wheels. That was the case for the Rollerblade Barbie. This Barbie variant was unique because her rollerblades had real flint inside, like a pocket lighter. Every time she rolled, sparks flew. Toy companies probably thought nothing could go wrong with a toy that could potentially set houses on fire. Well, they were wrong, because kids don't just gently roll their toys across the floor. Instead, they launch them off furniture, race them down hallways, and test them on every surface possible. If Barbie hit the wrong spot, she could start an accidental science experiment in combustion. Some kids even figured out she could light things on purpose, because when you hand a child a toy that literally makes fire, they're not going to use it for peaceful figure skating. Instead, they're going to see what else it can do. This led to quick lessons in what burns, what melts, and what causes parents to yell curse words no kid would ever want to hear. By 1993, people realized maybe fire and plastic dolls didn't mix. Stores pulled Rollerblade Barbie before she could turn more living rooms into safety lessons. Slap bracelets. Slap bracelets looked like harmless fun. You took a straight strip of metal covered in fabric, smacked it on your wrist, and it curled up like it was giving you a hug. But sometimes that hug came with extra excitement, like cuts and bruises. It turns out that wrapping a thin piece of metal around your arm at high speed wasn't the safest idea. That's because some slap bracelets were made from recycled tape measures, like the ones people use to measure things. But instead of measuring walls, these toys were measuring scratches. When the fabric wore out, the sharp metal edges poked through. This led to injuries and a few deep cuts that sent kids straight to the school nurse. Teachers started banning them because no one wanted to explain to a parent why their kid's trendy bracelet doubled as a tiny sword. The cheap versions only made things worse. The good slap bracelets had smooth edges and strong fabric. The bad ones had weak fabric that peeled off faster than a bad sunburn. Some didn't even bother with a protective coating, meaning kids were smacking themselves with metal strips. If the bracelet didn't cut you, it could pinch your skin, pull out hair, or snap in half and fly across the room like an angry rubber band. Then, during the 90s, stores stopped selling slap bracelets, and companies had to redesign them with better materials. The new ones had thicker fabric and rounded edges, so they wouldn't turn into tiny weapons. But parents and schools had already boycotted these toys because no one wanted a bracelet that could double as a miniature guillotine for your wrist. Slip and slide. Imagine seeing your kids having the time of their lives in the middle of a hot summer, playing on a slip and slide. They run, jump, and slide on a wet plastic sheet, looking like human torpedoes. So you decide to join the fun. But here's the problem, you're not a torpedo. You have bones, and bones don't like sudden stops. The original slip and slide was designed for kids under 12, who are small and flexible. But teenagers and adults didn't think kids should have all the fun, so they tried it, and physics punished them. A kid's weight makes them glide safely. An adult's weight makes them slam into the ground like a bag of bricks. Their momentum stops, but their spine doesn't get the memo. People ended up with broken bones, neck injuries, and even paralysis. The worst injuries happened when bigger people slid head first. Their upper body kept moving while their lower body stopped, which twisted their spine in ways spines are not supposed to twist. Some people suffered permanent spinal cord damage. So in the 1990s, the US finally stepped in like a parent allergic to fun. They warned adults and teens to stay off this thing unless they wanted to spend the summer in a hospital bed. Whammo, the company that made Slip and Slide, put out warnings too, but people still tried. Some even built homemade versions, which were longer, faster, and way more dangerous. Because they thought nothing says fun like testing your body's breaking point. Technically, Slip and Slide isn't banned, but if you're an adult, you've been warned. Your spine is not a spring, your bones are not rubber, and the ground is not your friend.